The 1983 memoir of former Godfather Joseph Bonanno quickly became one of the most controversial books because of what it revealed about the Mafia empire, the calculations of the bosses, and the secrets of the underworld that had shaken American society for a long time. The life of the character who became the youngest boss in America at the age of 20 was also made into a television series called Bonanno, A Godfather's Story. Welcome to Detective TV. Joseph Bonanno was born on January 18, 1905 in Castellammare del Golfo, a town in northwestern Sicily, which was also the homeland of the Genovese crime family, Joe Masseria, and Cosa Nostra boss Salvatore Maranzano. When Bonanno was 3 years old, his family moved to the United States and lived in the Williamsburg, Brooklyn area for about 10 years before returning to Italy. Bonanno returned to the United States illegally in 1924 by boarding a Cuban fishing boat in Tampa Bay, Florida. In 1930, the Castellammare War, a power struggle between Italian-American mafia gangs, broke out. The two main opposing sides were the gangs of Joe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano, Joseph Bonanno's fellow Sicilian. Bonanno was recruited by Maranzano as a henchman, protecting the distilleries and punishing disobedience when necessary. Bonanno called his time under Maranzano his apprenticeship. In Carl Sifakis's book Encyclopedia of the Mafia, the Castellammare War is seen as a confrontation between those who wanted to maintain the old order and those who wanted to reform the mafia system. The old mafia were conservative, respected the old rules, and did not do business with non-Italian gangs. That is what Masseria defended. Masseria's ranks included such notorious criminals as Charles Lucky Luciano, Vito Genovese, Joe Adonis, Carlo Gambino, Albert Anastasia, and Frank Costello. On the other side were criminals who believed that the young, reformist gangs of Salvatore Maranzano were the future. Charles Lucky Luciano, a skilled bootlegger at the age of 19, had caught the eye of powerful boss Joe Masseria. However, Luciano was increasingly annoyed by his boss's stagnant business thinking, and what made him hate Masseria even more was his contempt for immigrants, especially Sicilians like him. According to Luciano, such localism would only make everyone worse off. Salvatore Maranzano saw loopholes that could be exploited. He secretly contacted Luciano, planning a purge to strip Masseria of his power, and Luciano agreed. Masseria was murdered while dining at the Villa Tomorrow restaurant in Coney Island on April 15, 1931. The New York Times reported, Masseria was sitting playing cards with 2 or 3 men when he was suddenly shot in the back, head, and chest. An autopsy showed that Masseria had no food in his stomach. No arrests were made, no witnesses were given, and Luciano had an alibi. After Masseria's death, Luciano took full control of the lottery operations in Little Italy. After his victory, Maranzano reorganized the gang. The 5 New York crime families were then led by Luciano, Joseph Prophesai, Thomas Gagliano, Vincent Mangano, and Maranzano. All of them took orders from Maranzano, who now became Capo di Tutti Capi, boss of bosses. However, Maranzano's reign did not last long. The boss was shot and stabbed to death in his office on September 10, 1931. 4 gunmen disguised as Federal Internal Revenue Service agents stormed Maranzano's office, opened fire, and killed the boss. The FBI and many social commentators quickly commented, "A wave of crime fighting, known as the Sicilian Evening Stars, is sweeping the country." Or, "This is a turning point in American crime history." After the death of boss Maranzano, a name quickly emerged, Joseph Bonanno. In his autobiography, Joseph Bonanno claimed to know nothing about the plan to kill Maranzano. But that was absurd because if he had been loyal to Maranzano, Bonanno would have been killed. In fact, he benefited greatly from Maranzano's death, becoming the boss of a branch of the gang. With his 2 right-hand men, Frank Garofalo and John Bonventre, Bonanno's criminal organization operated in a wide range of areas, from loan sharking, bookmaking, prostitution to real estate. During his 33-year reign, Bonanno expanded his empire beyond New York to Arizona, California, Canada, and Haiti. The Bonanno family made a fortune from gambling, loan sharking, and narcotics. Bonanno publicly criticized the drug trade and denied involvement in it, But in reality, the Bonanno family was one of the main sources of narcotics in New York. Even with the support of his cousin Stefano Magaddino, the Buffalo boss, Joseph Bonanno began building his career in Canada. The Bonanno godfather considered Arizona his domain, establishing a real estate and insurance company in Tucson and buying a nearby cotton farm. Bonanno began to move into California, where the local mafia families had little influence. Bonanno also bought a cheese factory in Wisconsin, a large farm in New York, and expanded his network to Haiti with a large casino. By the early 1960s, Bonanno's ambitions began to clash with those of his family. Many of Bonanno's underlings felt that he was too indifferent to New York and focused only on outside business. Some other bosses did not like the way Bonanno ran things. In fact, the other bosses respected Bonanno because he had the support of his closest ally, Joe Prophesy, the boss of the Colombo family. When Prophesy died of cancer in 1962, Bonanno's ambitions had reached their peak. Bonanno decided to establish himself as the boss of bosses. Bonanno hired Prophesy's successor, Joe Magliocco, to assassinate those he thought were in his way, including famous New York bosses Carlo Gambino and Tommy Lucchese, Frank DeSimone in Los Angeles, and Bonanno's cousin, the Buffalo boss Stefano Magaddino. Bonanno and Magliocco agreed that Magliocco would take care of the New York bosses and assigned the task to the notorious hitman Joe Colombo. However, Colombo flipped the card. Instead of carrying out the assassination plan, Colombo reported it to bosses Lucchese and Gambino. These two godfathers immediately informed the council, a council of mafia bosses from all over the United States. The council asked Bonanno and Magliocco to appear. Only Magliocco complied with this request and confessed to participating in the assassination plot. As a result, the council forced Magliocco to retire and named Joe Colombo as his successor. In fact, the godfathers could have imposed a more severe punishment, but Magliocco was seriously ill at the time and died a year later. The real punishment was for the mastermind, Bonanno. However, Bonanno refused to appear. Furious, the council stripped Bonanno of his position and replaced him with Gaspar di Gregorio. The Bonanno clan was now divided into two factions, one loyal to Bill Bonanno, Joe's son, and the other led by di Gregorio. At the same time, Bonanno was charged with several crimes and ordered to appear in court. Bonanno later described that period of his life as a time of great turmoil. On October 20, 1964, the 60-year-old Godfather Bonanno was scheduled to appear before a grand jury the following day, and lawyers were called in to advise him. The federal government was trying to catch Bonanno in his organized crime activities. Meanwhile, the Mafia Council had heard of Bonanno's plans to overtake them through a series of assassination plots in order to make himself the boss of bosses. Bonanno felt he deserved this coveted position because, unlike other godfathers, he considered himself the last remaining man of honor in the Sicilian Mafia tradition. Bonanno suddenly disappeared, and when he resurfaced in May 1966, he claimed that he had been kidnapped by two Buffalo family members, Peter and Antonino Magaddino, in retaliation for his attempted assassination of Stefano Magaddino. According to some, the whole affair was actually a play directed by Bonanno to avoid having to testify in court in Manhattan. Stefano Magaddino held his hostage at a New York ranch for 6 weeks, then drove Bonanno to El Paso, Texas, where Bonanno called a friend in Tucson to pick him up. Bonanno was later indicted for failing to appear, but Bonanno appealed for 5 years until the charges were dismissed in 1971. Meanwhile, the tensions between the two factions of the Bonanno family quickly led to bloody clashes on the streets of New York. Other mafia groups were not happy with the escalation of the conflict, as the purges would eventually attract police attention and hurt business. They all wanted to end the situation. Di Gregorio suggested that the two sides sit down and negotiate a peace treaty. Representatives from both sides agreed to meet one evening on Troutman Street in Brooklyn. Di Gregorio and his gang arrived first, but did not keep their promise. As soon as Salvatore Bonanno showed up, Di Gregorio's men opened fire, attempting to strike first. Salvatore Bonanno and his gang returned fire. Miraculously, no one was killed. After the clash, Joseph Bonanno appeared and proposed to the council a deal to end the violence. He would give up his role as head of the mafia and retire to Arizona, on the condition that the council accept his son, Bill Bonanno, as the new boss and his brother-in-law, Frank Labruzzo, as his second-in-command. Of course, the council was not fooled. They knew that Bonanno would continue to be in charge even if he were stripped of his title. So their answer was that Bonanno could wash his hands of the Mafia, and the council would appoint a new boss. Bonanno then quickly disappeared. In 1968, Bonanno suffered a major heart attack. He appeared in Arizona, and at the same time informed the council that he had decided to retire, and this time for good. In fact, during his retirement, Godfather Bonanno still maintained a relationship with J. Kennedy and supported his presidential bid. However, after winning the election and launching an anti-mafia campaign, J. Kennedy was assassinated. This unexpected death created suspicions within the Mafia bosses. Joseph Bonanno was at the top of the list of suspects and was quickly arrested. Due to insufficient evidence to charge him, Joseph Bonanno was released. Joseph Bonanno was first convicted by the government in 1980 at the age of 75 for obstructing a jury. The judge found Bonanno had deliberately delayed the investigation into money laundering through companies owned by his son. Bonanno was sentenced to a year in prison, and then another 14 months for refusing to testify in the trial against the leaders of the five families. Former Manhattan Attorney General Rudy Giuliani had asked Bonanno to answer questions about the claims he made in his memoir, specifically about the existence of the council, but Bonanno did not reveal anything during the trial. Joseph Bonanno died of heart failure on May 11, 2002, leaving behind a remarkable story of the rise and expansion of the Mafia in America.
Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. And as always, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next one.